Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum. I'm your host Faiza Naqvi in your own program, Meri, Pehchan. I hope and pray that you all are doing well by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may Allah protect you all with all your families and loved ones. We often see when we look into the history or back days when we were being raised as a child, that we always had somebody who used to teach us the true form of what is being a man or a woman in the house or in the society. But nowadays we see that this is something which is going through from the great struggle. Men doesn't understand what is the meaning of true masculinity, and that's why we have chosen this topic today, which how to understand the true form of masculinity and what makes a man a man. And because in general in society we do have the men who are living with their shadow forms, like in a negative sense, they are behaving like a tyrant, or maybe with the negative behaviors they are showing up, and that is something which is supposed to be handled well. And it should be we need such people who could raise such men who can understand what is the meaning of true being a true man. So for that matter, we have a very important guest with us who would be talking about the topic in depth, and we will move on to our guest. Guest is Brother Bilal Ali Hugh, who is from London, and he is a psychotherapist and been working as a psychotherapist for 14 years, and is also involved in a research program with the teenage boys, and also host some vlogs as well. So we move on to our guest, and we will welcome him on the show. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Bilal. I'm really honored to have you on the show, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for your time.
Walaikum salam. And yes, I'm happy to be here, sister. Happy to be here, sister Faiza.
Thank you so much. Brother, before we move on to the topic, I would like to ask, which book have you chosen for our viewers today, and what is that about, and how do you think it's important for them to read, and what they might be able to learn? So it will be like 5-7 minutes, so it's up to you how you want to share the book review regarding the book you have chosen.
Okay, so the book that I've chosen is a book by a late doctor. His name is Viktor Frankl, and he was a psychiatrist. He was a neurologist and a philosopher and a writer. And he is responsible for developing a school of psychology called existential psychology, or he contributed in a major way to this school of psychology, this thing they call logotherapy. And it's about looking for the meanings in life, and that there's a therapeutic element in terms of us as human beings understanding our purpose, that we sometimes become unwell at emotional dis-ease, or develop psychological dis-ease, should I say, because we are almost like lost for purpose. You see this sometimes with young people. You may be able to verify this when youth are going through turbulent times because they haven't found a direction that they want to chart in life, and so they get caught up in a lot of antisocial or destructive behavior. But it can happen to people at any stage in life where we lose a kind of understanding of meaning and purpose. And so the book is called Man's Search for Meaning. And this doctor, this Viktor Frankl, he was basically a Holocaust survivor. So he gained these insights. Some of these insights he developed when he was actually in a concentration camp, and it's very much about, in essence, if you really boil it down, it's about how to keep a positive attitude. And positive doesn't mean happy, but positive means looking into being hopeful about the future, for example, or like I said, still remaining focused even when you're in very, very negative circumstances, because we can imagine what a concentration camp will be like. And the book is very, very empowering. It's one of the first sort of books in that field of sort of psychology and counseling that I read when I was a counseling student way back in, say, 2005. It's a very rich book, and it's influenced me to a large degree ever since then about being aware of what do things mean when we become upset, when we become excited, when we're happy. But in terms of interactions, life is important and important things are happening continuously, but we sometimes go on what they call like autopilot, right? Like a
Mm.
car, like not really present, thinking, aware of our breathing, aware of our, the smells around us and the things that we're seeing. We're just like almost like in a dream state and we're just going along automatically. But this book is kind of encouraging us to take note and be aware and to check in with yourself about what do things mean and how important things are as well, instead of just taking life for granted and just being on this kind of like um, half asleep, half awake kind of state, like being very present. And so, yeah, it's a really empowering book, and particularly good for people who may be going through difficult times, because it's kind of
Mm.
is like that gives hope. It's not always that we can control our external environment, where we find ourselves, or our living conditions, or our financial conditions, or social settings. We don't necessarily have all the control over those things, but the thing that we do have control over is how we experience life, our internal journey, what attitude I'm going to adopt, what kind of mentality I'm going to adopt now I'm in a certain situation. I used to talk to some of the young men I used to work with years ago. I worked in a prison for young people, teenagers to early 20s. I worked on what they call suicide watch, just safeguarding, keeping sure,
Mm.
making sure that prisoners don't harm themselves, they go home safe. So I used to work in that field, and that's how I got into counselling. And I would say to them that, for example, as a youngster, he might be 19 years old. He's been sentenced to 10 years prison. You will not go home for 10 years prison. You have no control over that. You will not go home. But you have control of how you choose to serve your sentence. You can get into gang affiliations. You can fight. You can pass things that are banned, contraband. You can pass those things around, be involved in the black market. You could choose to do that, or you could do a course, or you can go to the gymnasium, or you can take time to go to the library and get certain books out and read and edify yourself and kind of make this experience work for you, because you're not going home before 10 years. So there's where the choice is. So you don't have a choice to go home, but you have a choice how you serve your sentence. And that is kind of like, I've kept that as a bit of a metaphor for life for those
Mm.
people also that are not in a physical prison, but they may be in a sort of tight situation where they have not all the control in terms of the external factors, but internally, in terms of our presence, in terms of our connection with God, in terms of what we choose to focus our minds on, we have choice. And we should always be recognizing where in life we have choices and then empowering ourselves by the choices that we make. So, yeah, really inspirational book. Very, very important piece of literature there.
Yes.
Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. You can get it on Amazon. It's online, hard copy, or
Mhm.
some people Kindle. Some people use these ebooks. You can definitely get it on ebook online as well. But yeah,
That's
good read.
wonderful. Yeah, I'm sure it will be wonderful because it inspires me as well at the moment that I would feel like reading that book as well. So moving on to the topic, brother, I would just like to know first why it is important, especially in today's age, when we say like this is a modern era and every problem has been solved and everyone has all the information they needed to have, and everything is in the hands of everyone, in other words. But still, like for example, if I want to say like why it is important to understand the masculinity, as we are going to discuss it further afterwards, but as a speaker, as a counselor, as a therapist, and as an experienced person in that field, how do you see why it is important and why should we give it an importance? Sometimes we understand it is important, but we don't give importance to such topics, and we don't think like it is important to focus on these things and build upon them and all that. So how do you see why it is important to understand, and what are the ways of understanding it properly?
Good question. Very deep questions, actually. I would say that the reason why it's particularly important, and I've put focus on masculinity in this time, and for some people it may be controversial, because some people may say, "Well, what about femininity?" However, as much as Muslims, we have our own ideas about men and women and gender roles and masculinity, femininity, and we have role models from the past. We are not living in the past; we're living in the modern era, the contemporary era, and ideas from outside of the community still influence, or conversations. We're still a part of those conversations. Let's put it that way. We're still a part of those that dialogue about men and women. And we'd say mainstream society, because of the advent, or the emergence of feminism and women's rights, there's a lot of positive things that have come out of that in terms of equality of opportunity for women and empowerment. There's some old male chauvinism and inappropriate ideas and behaviors that were maybe somewhat oppressive or somewhat dictatorial, right? And so they've been addressed in mainstream society to a certain degree, and that's been helpful. However, my contention is that the modern feminism has almost gone too far. It's become like an oppressive force in and of itself, and now it's become tyrannical and actually, in some pockets, anti-male, anti-men. They start using terms like toxic masculinity, but really you're almost using it to describe things that are just kind of common to men, that it's toxic. Um, and also using terms like, you even heard crazy terms like, they're dealing with violence against women. So as a campaign, we're going to make up a hashtag called hashtag all men are trash. Totally not acceptable. This has gone to another extreme now. And while older men who, you're mature, you've had some life experience, you're kind of clear in your identity, you may be more secure. You might be irritated when you hear these type of things. You may want to debate, but they have less of an impact. But the impact on young boys who are forming their identity, 10 years old, 12 years old, 14 years old, this type of talk in the public domain and this trashing of masculinity and the trashing of men is not, I contend, is not doing their psychology, their personal development, their identity any good. It's becoming quite healthy. And so feminism's gone to another extreme, and it's affecting the development of young boys. And so what you sometimes will find is that boys can be looking to try and define their identity, their manhood, their masculinity, then in very dangerous ways or very risque ways or unproductive ways. And so this is why I feel like it's very important for us to have this conversation in general, not just here, but this conversation about masculinity in the modern era. It's
That's
very, very key
wonderful.
about the
Yeah, and
youngsters that's coming up. That's what's at stake in the minds of the young men.
so, how do you think, like, who would teach them? Because when we see in the olden ages, we were used to have somebody at home generally, like, who were used to teach us, like, okay, this is how to behave like a man, for instance, and this is called bravery, and this is called courage, or something like that. But nowadays, we see like parental control is really less on the children, especially the young children, and there are many examples of the, like, you can say, mature men, like you can say, like 50 years old or 60 years old, who are still living in kind of like a boy like psychology. So how do you see that, and how we can create a balance, like when a teenager is growing up, these are the steps we need to take, like for example, as a parent or as a society, to build a strong man who can take the leadership roles, for instance, in future. And this is the step. If a man of 50 years old, for instance, or 60 years old, behaving in a childlike psychology or childlike manners, for instance, he should be looking into his himself, and he should be like dealing with them properly, or something like that. So how do you see this thing, and how would you guide on this point?
Yeah, part of the research what I'm involved in is actually it's a mentoring program and for young boys, school age boys. So I'm in a
Hmm.
secondary big portion of the week actually with the students. I work with about 55 grade broken down into 5 groups. So do group sessions and I see them individually as well. And, the data is all recorded um, for the research and it's going to be analyzed and so on and so forth. And what my work in this field has led me to come into contact with and discover is that there was something called, we use in the English language, rites of passage. And in different societies, South in Americas, in ancient time, throughout Europe, throughout rural Africa, rural Asia, when before the development of modern cities and jet planes, they would have some kind of system that at some point that the young boys will be taken outside to the outskirts of the village. For this is just an example, right? And it may be 1 or 2 days, for example, and they will be given a series of psychological challenges, mental riddles that they had to figure out, physical tasks that they had to complete. But once they completed those challenges, they would be brought back into the village and celebrated by all and recognized as men. There was not this kind of teenage and adolescent period. And now they don't sit with the little kids, they sit with the men. And they watch how the men operate, what is appropriate, what's inappropriate, how men are modeling manhood to them. But this institution that existed in so many different societies has been eroded with time and has disappeared. So my contention is that uh, with the social media and where education is coming from so many angles, and now people even say, we say, what is a man? What does that mean? Can a woman, somebody born as a woman, be? There's all these different complexities. So just thinking about biological males, boys who are born in a physical body that are trying to come into contact with and understand their masculinity, there is a need for some kind of process where boys are by themselves as boys and they're dealing with issues that relate to their masculinity in terms of their some lessons they may learn to be about being responsible, being accountable, but also about dreams and aspirations and stuff like that. And like you said, things to do with like whether it's through courage or honor and integrity and these different values. So I don't think that would ever be anybody too old, any male that will be too old to value these lessons for their lifelong lessons. But definitely for the young boys, we need to create some kind of institution or programs that are more in the mosque, in the school, in different parts
Hmm.
of the institutions where boys of a certain age can actually go through a process and they come out the other side like with a better vision and a better certainty of what kind of man they want to be.
Mm. And you mentioned in your discussion earlier that you are working like with the young children who are in prison, and also like obviously working at the moment with the young children as well. So I would like to ask how many, like in terms of Muslim society specifically, if we want to see, what is the ratio of Muslim children who are like, for example, in prison, or who are like like you are dealing with them. Because they were like behaving like a lower standards, or like in terms of lower standard or something. So how do you see that, and why do you think is the reason they are in, for example, jail, or they are not behaving the way they are behaving? I mean, how much role do you think in the home, like, or the parents, like they are, what kind of role they are playing in that matter? So how would you see that?
Yeah, so although I no longer work in the prison, I mean, I was working there for the better part of 9 years. So I worked with a lot of Muslims. There was a lot of Muslims in the prison. I couldn't give you a number, but let's just say Friday prayers a week, over 100 Muslims just in the Friday prayers alone, and that it got so big they had to create two Jummas. They couldn't combine the Jummas; they
Mm,
had to split it in half and stuff like that. And there were some common themes that I came across, that people that had come from, some people were just some of the Muslims had come from abroad and were just trying to get their head around being in the UK, and got they were a bit vulnerable and got caught up in the criminal justice system. But there's also those a lot of Muslims that were born and bred here, but they were also, by being in this society, not necessarily just because you're a Muslim, protected from the ills of this society. So you could be going to school with non-Muslims and they're in a gang and you'll become friendly with them, and you get caught up in drugs, so selling drugs, street violence, crime, yeah. And the common theme was, it seems like there's some trouble in the background, there's some instability at home,
mm,
and maybe it's a fracture, there's divorce, there's single parent home, mom cannot cope. It sounds like a stereotype, but to a large degree, there was a lot of it that I recognized as it was actually true. That was a situation. And but what made it more complicated, and this is why sometimes I seem like I'm a male advocate, is because I feel there's something about the way that women are socialized, or girls are socialized into womanhood, because of the culture, most cultures, Western, Islamic, Muslim, whatever, women tend to talk. They come in groups and they might share their vulnerabilities. They
mm,
may open up to a friend and confide in a group of friends about what they're struggling with. They may cry in front of their friends or something like this. But this is okay. They're comforted and they may be given advice and they may be given support or given direction of who to see and how this can be overcome. Or just talking about it maybe even allows them to feel better, right?
mm.
That situation. change, but they feel emotionally like I spoke to my friend, my girlfriend, and I had a good cry, and they comforted me, and now I'm okay. Maybe I can see things a little bit clearer. But with the males, because there's this thing about being strong and not being vulnerable, and that sometimes they keep the young boys who are not managing well psychologically. They keep stuff inside, and
Mm.
then like a bottle of Coca Cola that's been when you take the lid off of it, it just so it erupts in sometimes in
Mm.
destructive ways, and they manage stress different. They manage stress in a very
Yeah.
different way, destructive. So that's where
Mm.
I think the Muslim girls may come from the same home as the same
Yeah.
Muslim, but the boys will take because of their gender, they might take a different path in dealing with some difficulties compared to their the sisters that might come from the same home.
So, what advice would you give to the parents on that point? For example, if I have young children of like teenage, for instance, then how would I know, for example, even if we are friendly, we are talking to our children and things like that, if there is something going on which is wrong, maybe with my son or daughter, for instance. So, how parents and especially mothers or the fathers, whose role do you think is the best, or it could be anyone who can be the friend with the child or something like that, how they can help their child and how they can monitor or the guide them through that they can, if they have any problem and they come to them and they can say it, okay, that's how I'm feeling and that's the trouble or the thing I'm facing or something like that. So what advice would you give to the parents who are maybe in this challenging situation at the moment, so how they can cope with that situation, for instance?
Yeah, yeah, that's very important because sometimes parents can feel powerless. When you have teenagers and
Mm.
times are moving so fast, and what was the situation in our time when we were teenagers very different to when we may have children
Mm.
and their teenagers. So we could feel like not equipped. The youth culture is moving so quickly, and there's so many elements to it. And I think that, to be honest with you, it's not all about parents having all the answers, but I think it's working on that relationship where child feels whether it's mum or dad, but definitely boys would need a lot of input from their dad, but whether it's mum or dad, that they want to know that the parents value them, that the parents love them and believe in them, and that even if you don't feel like speaking about it now, I'm here to listen and I believe in you, and I'm always here. I'm not going to judge you or whatever. These type of things, because you can't always get teenagers to open up just like that. You want them to speak. It's frustrating. They won't
Mm.
say. But what you got to work on is your relationship where they feel like, what, I can open up, I can say a bit about what's going on for me and stuff like that. That's the kind of thing that you want to do is work on that relationship, work on that closeness, that affection and stuff like that.
Mm. And how would you suggest, like, sometime I've seen, like, especially in our community, for example, we see the parents who are like praising, for example, cousins in front of their young children, or for example, the children are feeling in a kind of competition with their other, siblings, or maybe other cousins, or maybe in the school they have children who might be like they are like kind of in competition, like, oh, he get good marks and he is like this and he has good looks, for instance, and he has this and he has that. Sometimes they are like in that kind of situation. So what advice would you give to the parents, like when they are raising their children or the son or the boy, for example, especially, so how they can guide them, like if they are facing such situation, they can deal themselves better, instead of like, even if they are not coming to the parents, they can at least I mean they can cope up with that positively and not like suppressing themselves the way you said earlier, like they are keeping things inside and sometimes this something is like erupting like something. So how would you advise the parents, like these are the steps they can take to save their children emotionally, mentally, or like intellectually, you can say?
Yeah, yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, you mentioned something about when the issues to do with things like, for example, parents praising one sibling and not another. And I think that generally speaking, adults need to be aware of things like that because those can have really devastating, like long term impact on people when they feel like I was the black sheep. I was the one that was singled out. I was the one that wasn't, cared for, or I got treated differently. and
mm,
unfavorable. These things, like we are human beings, so your parents can't be perfect, but to try and be mindful of things like this because it really does like have long term, like ramifications on people's kind of like their formative years, and parents is the first place that you learn love and security and things like this. So when if parents get it wrong or cause damage in those environments, then that adult is taking that to potentially be married, to have children, and then kind of carry on those things. So the
mm,
parents have to be mindful. But I think also the thing that I think that we need to work on in the Muslim community is creating more safe spaces where it's not necessarily about and I know they are happening a little bit, but but I just think we need more of them. Where it's not just about okay, we're gonna have a lesson and an imam or a sheikh is gonna teach, and they're gonna get lessons on this. But sometimes you just need like a Muslim youth worker, just an older brother or older sister that is maybe some
mm,
university age, and they're kind of mentoring and working with and being around the younger, year 8, year 9s and stuff like that. They look up to them, and just kind of like having that relationship and that bond where they feel like, I've got some stuff I'm going through. Maybe I could talk to them. They can give me a little bit of advice or how they dealt with it in their era. It could be something to do, or I'm getting bullied at school, or I'm feeling a bit, I'm not cool. I don't have the right clothes, or how did you deal with it? These type of things, which
mm,
adult is very small, but in a
mm.
child's, it's a big deal. They feel it, they really feel it. It's about their self esteem and stuff like that. So I think we need more of this type of space where the children feel like people they can talk to, they can relate to, and they feel understood.
Hmm.
You know.
So, how do you think our community, I mean, for example, as a Muslim community, especially, like how much it is important for our mosque or the community centers to develop such programs which can like guide the parents, like for example, if they have parents who have children under 10, and the parents who are dealing with the teenage children and all that, what kind of guidance a community center can give such parents, or they can like develop such programs? How important do you think it is, and how important for the parents to educate themselves for their children, because I've seen many parents, when children go to high school, for instance, they think now they are big enough to look after themselves, so we don't need to all the time, I mean, attach to them or something like that, and they just
Mhm.
leave them the way they are, and if they need anything, they get them from wherever they need it from, but they don't see them like how they are feeling, how what they are going through, and what kind of emotional, mental, or like kind of stuff they are going through. So how do you think it is important for our parents to equip themselves gradually? When their children are growing, they should be growing themselves as well, intellectually, emotionally,
Mhm.
mentally, and educational perspective as well. So how do you think it is important, and what kind of guidance do you think they can take from, for example, nowadays there is so much available on YouTube as well, and in the community centers, if or anywhere, I mean, what suggestions would you give to the community centers or the clerics we have, or the community overall on that point?
Well, I see some of the things I mentioned. I have seen it emerge in small, and it would just be
Hmm.
good if it mushroomed and they started to see it more. But like for example, there are a lot of psychotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors,
Hmm.
social workers. A lot of these type of professionals in the Muslim community, and in terms of you know morality and theology, and in certain subjects to do with raising children, there is we've got clear guidance from the religious sources and from the religious experts. But I think in this modern era, we like not using a resource that we have in the community, which is the Muslim professionals. Those, like I said, counselors, therapists, social workers, and so I think we need more like workshops, seminars, discussions, Q&A sessions where it could be topics like, for example, parenting, young people, and social media, and the dangers
Hmm.
of social media, or the challenges of social media. Because a lot of the children, they live on their phone, they live
Hmm.
on social media. It is everything to them. They're on it all the time, and there are some downsides. There's lots of good information on there, empowering stuff, but there's cyberbullying. There's all kinds. There's risk. There's what you call child protection issues. There's all these different factors that we
Hmm.
need to be aware more sharp as Muslim parents in the 21st century. We need to be a little bit more on point. And there are, like I said, these professionals that could have these sessions to kind of like put parents up to speed, and maybe something that children and parents can attend together, because it's something that the children are probably aware it's social media, or there's going to be a talk and it's about TikTok and stuff like that. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
maybe the children be more willing to kind of want to find out what this is about. So both parent and children can learn stuff, and they can be in an environment where there can be discussion as well, so that people can ask questions. It could maybe role play, like training. So there's lots of ways you can do it. Make it very interesting, very
Mm.
engaging, and it's not just somebody who's an expert. You just talk for half an hour and say thank you and go. No, like engage the people, find out what their
Mm.
opinion is on this, ask them some questions, then discuss this. Like make it interactive, make it
That's
interesting,
true.
engage. Yeah.
And do you think we do have, I mean, I'm not sure, maybe you know better than me, like there are any kind of Muslim magazines or Muslim kind of media which could be supporting our young children, where they can use their skills as a Muslim, and they can be empowered by them. For example, if they are writing to a magazine, if they are writing to, or maybe they are using their other skills they have, like drama skills or stuff like that. And do you think we need such atmosphere where they can do the things they want to in an effective way, and we should promote it more often or something like that, so that they could use their potential in full or something like that.
I think that would be a brilliant idea. I'd love to see that. If there was, say, for example, an online magazine, and that could be whether it's via YouTube, Facebook, or it could be broadcast on different social media forums, but where the young people maybe they're supervised by some adults, some professionals, whatever the case may be,
Mm.
but they are the ones that are driving what the content is. They're the ones that's driving what's important, because sometimes we might run the risk as adults to say, "Oh, I think this is important, so let me speak to the young people about this." But sometimes it has to be the other way around. That we have to almost like these people that the business world, they survey, they find out to the consumer. You're the one that's going to be consuming the product. So what product is good? What makes it interesting? What makes this one better than that one? And then you base on those ideas and you go and create something for that market. So likewise, it would be good if we could get young people involved consulting to say, this is the main problem right now. This is the
Mm.
this is the issue. Young girls are hijabi, they're getting approached online by boys, and they
Mm.
don't know how to deal with the difficulties of keeping the hijab. In terms of the physical one is fine, but how to keep a distance and not be too friendly. This might be an uncomfortable issue for some people to talk about, but
Mm.
this might be what the young people are facing. There's no point in giving a nice speech about something 1,000 years ago, and this is the crisis, or this is the issue that the young girls are facing, or the young brothers are facing. So it'd be good to have their input, letting them really have a voice. But obviously, there's elders there, there's adults there to supervise and make sure everything is in order and appropriate. But
Mm.
that would be very powerful. That would be very powerful. Could be very
Yeah, I
powerful.
think so. Like we should do something on that, like which could be supervised by the, obviously many professional parents are around in our community, and if they can set up such kind of group where they can initiate some kind of magazines or stuff like that, in which they would know like these are the rules and regulation. There are certain editors who can guide them in proper way, and in this way we can obviously educate our young people, and we can make some kind of community leaders of future. So how do you think, we as a community, for example, or as a parent, or whichever way you want to see it, like how we can raise our young boys as future leaders with the character, with the spiritual and mental and emotional, you can say, strength, who might be able to take the future responsibilities and who are able to understand. And the second thing I would like to ask, how much hypocrisy you see within the young children nowadays. For example, you are dealing with the young children, so do you see any kind of hypocrisy in their character when you see them, even in jails or even in journal, whenever you see them, do they behave like a hypocrite, or yet they are just like blunt and straightforward, yes, I'm doing this and that and all that? So how do you see that as well?
Oh, when you say hypocrite, you mean in a sense secretive,
You
or
can say that,
or
like for example, sometimes children are in kind of family politics, and they are sometimes in politics of, in our culture there are certain types of politics, even the work politics, even the kind of, and this is not the positive politics, it's the negative politics, that they show
Okay,
something
okay.
else and they do something else, and that's how they like cheat their parents maybe, or their families, or somebody around them, or something like that.
Oh no! Let me speak to the young people. That my experience of young people, that they are under immense pressure, immense peer pressure, and I think that that's something that us as adults we sometimes don't appreciate because we think, what kind of pressure could you be under? You're 13 years old. You're a girl and you're 13 years, or you're like you don't know tough life. I came from another country when we didn't have water, we didn't have these things. You guys have got it
Yes.
made, right? So we sometimes we think that and on a sense of material accessibility and infrastructure, we live in the UK, for example.
Mm.
That is true. It's not comparable to say Africa or Asia or life could be in say like South America, but in terms of mental pressure that the children can be under because to fit in, to be not the victim of verbal, not bullying physically, but this verbal bullying and people getting at you and belittling you and trying to humiliate you or make you small, right? They are under a lot of pressure and they have to defend themselves. There's a lot of politics and hierarchy and pecking order with young people, and so yeah, I think that that's the thing. What comes to mind is that the kind of like pressure that they're actually under to I don't want to say survive because I don't make it sound so bleak, but it can be challenging. It can be challenging. They have their politics, and to us, it's
Mm.
just children playing. But in their world, this is like president of the United States, and this is like Russia and China. To them, it's all important. It's everything to them because that's
Yes.
their feeling and their
Mm.
reputation. If you I don't know, like something happened, two kids have a scuffle and they film it, somebody film it and post it online. He said, "Oh, he got bullied, or he's soft, or he's a victim." Like so we think it as adults, it's kids, kids. But to them, the person on the receiving end, he may not sleep well that night. It may affect his mental health.
Mm.
He's got
That's
to
true.
now jump across to go to school, to go into that world, to be the one that they were poking at or deriding and mocking and stuff like that. So, yeah, it can be emotionally, demanding for our young people. And like I said, boys and girls process things in a different way. And so this is why I do push in terms of, almost like masculinity
Mm.
studies or as a mentor and as a rites of passage of these things for men. I do boys to men. So that journey from boys to men, I think is
Mm.
very. There's a lot of pressure on boys in a different way. Girls,
Mm.
they seem to navigate, especially Muslim girls. I know it's in the society. A lot of young people I work with, the girls they go through school less issues, maybe different type of issues to do with their weight or beauty or some other psychological stuff. But they kind of like seem to finish college and they get into university and they get their career going. Whereas sometimes I notice with some of the younger brothers, they fall off, they fall away from college, they fall away from learning a trade, and
Mm.
this is like a difficult because they are expecting to get married in their early 20s and they're going to be the emir of the house and they're supposed to have money for a meher and they're thinking, I don't really even have a profession yet. I'm not even sure what job I'm doing. I'm kind of just helping out somebody earning a few quid here. So different pressures on our young people.
So how would you like, because we are just left with around 10 to 12 minutes, you can say. So I would
Mhm.
like to ask you like, how this journey will work out well for the young children, like if we can help them or they can help themselves if they are watching somewhere, like being a boy, like from the boy psychology to mature man, sensible and confident man psychology, and from like a young childish boy to a mature sensible man with the character and dignity. So what steps they must take in order to achieve that goal, and what are the things they need to keep in mind while like preparing themselves for the future world, you can say. Obviously their world would be more demanding than the one we were like used to have or something. So
Hmm.
obviously what kind of activities they should be involved in, and what kind of traits you they should look for within self. Because the as a like human being, I feel like it's more like an inner journey. If you conquer yourself inside, it is very helpful outside to like fight back or
Hmm.
push away or push back or something like that. So how would you guide those young parents, young children, or people who are even getting married as a couple, like these are the things I need to see before I get married, before I have a child, before I, for example, start a job, before I like move on to my career or something, so that they won't make bigger mistakes, or they don't get into a like vulnerability or something. So how would you guide them, like, and what are the very very important steps you would want them to consider and make sure they work on well, and how would you guide them on that?
What I'm thinking of is just if there's some easy takeaway message that I can give, like some practical steps. Um, as in, like, it's not like it's a group therapy session where we can go into like a whole load of detail, but just touching on a few things. One of the things I think about from the parental point of view is that they our parents raising their sons to be husbands. Are they thinking about raising my son that he's going to be somebody's husband one day? So what qualities will a husband, whether it's a traditional husband or a modern era guy, but what, will he be? Am I preparing him for that role? That's one of the
Hmm.
things that parents have to ask themselves. The community has to ask themselves, have we created safe spaces where young people maybe can come together and they can speak about what are some of the issues that are bothering them? And it might mean that there aren't parents in that place. It might be a professional that's in that space where the young people can speak freely. It's confidential. They can get some advice, some tips, some pointers, and they can like feel empowered. But they don't have to be fear of judgment, because the fear of judgment is what keeps them hiding stuff and
Hmm.
smiling when there's a problem and giving you the thumbs up when there's a big issue and they're trying to hide stuff. So the other things that we need to create safe spaces. So one, are we preparing them to be husbands and being responsible and being accountable? Two, are we creating safe spaces so they can deal with their emotional health, their emotional well-being? Another thing I would say, just as to individuals, is that think about keeping a journal. Keeping a journal is can be quite empowering, and a journal
Hmm.
is a bit different from a diary. A diary, people kind of write details of what happened, whereas a journal is like you're journaling your emotional journey. So you might keep a note once a week about how some things will happen in the week and how it made you feel, or how you were feeling that week, how you were doing. Keeping a journal can help us to relieve emotional stress and anxiety, right? It can help us to, set goals and kind of track and monitor how close am I getting towards my goal. If I haven't, what is it that I need to do to improve? And the other aspects of keeping a journal as well is that it can even just help us to kind of organize our thinking and kind of like learn how to become better communicators by writing weekly. By writing, we read a lot, but what about writing? How often do we write so we can become better communicators? So even those three things can be like a starting point to moving things forward for our boys. But definitely, more safe spaces need to be created for our young boys, and we see them as
Hmm.
like men in training almost. Like there's a sign on the door should say stop men in training, because there's young boys inside with a mentor, with a counselor, with somebody, and they're doing some activities. And they're getting them thinking outside of the box and challenging themselves and thinking about things differently. But ultimately feeling empowered to define their own masculinity and like I said, to define what kind of man do I want to be, as opposed to just drifting into manhood, just whatever's on the telly or social media. No, they're empowered to have some kind of direction that they're going to chart out what they aim for in life.
Hmm. So there is one more question I'm left with. Like we still have like 5 6 minutes. That for example, what are the things that create a like what are the things which are like turn a positive person into a negative one? For example, especially in the young age, like sometimes there is the parents' behavior or the society behavior or something like that. So as a parent, what we must avoid doing in terms of like dealing with our young children, or like who are teenagers or something like that. So what steps we must avoid under all circumstances? Okay, this is something which we must not do, because that would create kind of a negative toxic masculine person,
Mhm,
like
mhm, mhm, mhm.
this is something I
Yes,
want.
yes, yes. We definitely should avoid um, not bullying. What's the word? I'm going to try and find the right word, but like to say shaming our children. Sometimes I think in Muslim cultures that shame is a very powerful tool, but it can be very damaging. So we should
Mm,
be aware of how we're using things to make people feel shame, right? But in general, our children in general, but our boys to be aware of how we're making our children feel shame. But and also the other thing as well that parents have to really take account. This is for both mum and for dad. Mums and in marriage is tough. Marriages have a lot of work. It's a partnership. It's a union, right? And what happens between parents? I know this is maybe difficult, but it needs to stay between parents. And the children should not be brought into the war as allies to side with mom or to side with dad. Parents'
mm,
disputes, differences, right, should really be private and they should stay on code because it really does cause a lot of damage when there's a fracture. People are married, they haven't divorced, but there's these politics and the children are on this side or this side, or sometimes for example, maybe a sister feels very frustrated with her husband, so then she articulates a lot of her frustrations and catalogues all the things that the husband hasn't done. Now, she's a right to feel frustrated if he isn't fulfilling his duty, but when she tells the children, that brings down the father's credibility in the children's eyes. So then now, when
mm,
there's a crisis in the family, and they say, "You're his dad. Go and speak to him." Because where is he? He's been out all night and he's been with these guys, and these guys got a leather jacket and a motorbike. They look dangerous. Go and speak to him. The dad has got no credibility. The mum has, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, has been seeping all this stuff into the child's ear. He doesn't even respect
mm,
his dad, right? But now, mum's gonna say, "Go and talk to him. He's your son. He's got
mm,
no. He's got like a bank. He's like going to the bank and you draw out all the money, and you're using a cash
mm,
point card. It's just give you back saying, no, you can't draw no money out. It's no good. It's just a card." Just so I know that sometimes parents are frustrated, but they have to really work together to keep this manage their business away from. Don't use the children as tools and inscript them as allies to side with you so that you could be the right one. Because they say, do you wanna win or do you want to stay married? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you want it to work? Can you work on that behind closed doors, or you get support from the elders or whatever? But try to keep whatever the cost is. Try to really keep the children away from that because it does really affect them. Very, very
mhm.
negative.
So one more thing I would like to ask, because as a last question, and we just have to finish about 55 minutes. So if you can share some views on like how to introduce our children, like, or attach our children with the religion, and do you think how important it is, and what are the sometimes children don't even understand, and we keep on pushing them on something they don't even understand or they don't even want to do, for example, as a Muslim child or something. So, what is the best way to convey the right message that they could have love for their religion, and if they are not connected with the religion, what we can do as a parent, obviously.
I would say, although I'm no expert in terms of religion, I would say that the more that they have a love for the religion, that means that we have to introduce it in a way of love. So that's
Mm,
where not strictness, but in a way of love, and
mm,
explain as much of the wisdom of the religion as possible, so that they feel they are being empowered and they're not being subjected. Like, oh, I just have to do this because it's a family thing, but they actually understand. Okay, so modesty means if I carry myself a certain way as a Muslimah and I dress a certain way, now my body's changing and stuff like this, then it will protect me, not just physically, but protect me from certain difficult social scenarios. So this is my dignity. Oh, I understand that. More inclined, more than you put this on, you do this because I say it doesn't work like this. And so same way like with the prayers for our sons or whatever that, that say this is a spiritual relief and this is like to keep you in tune. Like you go away in the world and you get caught up in stuff, but then you come back and you realign yourself with Allah and then you're recharged. It's like a meditation of sort. Then you go back into the world. You're more effective. You're more whole. You don't explain it in these ways that
mm,
the children. Yes, I want to do this. I would love prayer. I want to feel that. I want to
mm,
be spiritually clean. But if it's just do because I say, because that's what we always did, it's
Mm.
difficult for them to. In
Yes.
this era where everything is explained and the children are exposed to so much knowledge, we need to we need to step our game up. We need to step our
That's
game up.
wonderful. That's true. Religion must be taught in the like terms of love, and obviously, human beings are the like kind of reflection of kind of tawheed with the names of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. So we must try to introduce them with that, so that they can become a better human being, better person, and a person of the character. There were so many other questions I would want to continue with you, but at the moment the time is just finished. But it was really lovely to have you on the show, and it was really beautiful discussion we had with you, and I'm really grateful for your time, and it was honor to have you with us. Thank you so much for being on the
Thank
show.
you, thank you, thank you.
And to the viewers, I would just say, like, we all need to work on ourselves and our families, because family and the home is the only sacred institution which should be built upon the love of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. So keep yourself in touch with the religion, and educate yourself and be a human being and a role model for your family, for your children, so that we can build a better, strong, and effective society. With this message, I would like to take a leave, and we'll see you inshallah next week. Allah Hafiz.